Journeys Ahead. The Song of Serpents. Chapter 5. Beauty and the Beast. Written and narrated by T.S. ProArt. Slowly opening her eyes, Jida awoke to the gentle sound of rain pelting against glass. Quick sets of taps and dinks crashed upon a nearby window that glimmered a gray light into what Jida quickly realized to be some kind of interior. Instantly shooting up with a gasp, Jida took everything in that surrounded her. The musician had found herself within a circular-shaped and, dare she say, fancy room. Unique textured stone walls surrounded her, being donned with windows, flags, and oddly beautiful pieces of artwork. Paintings of landscapes were hanging below gentle flames that illuminated their oil-casted forms. As a part-time artist, Jida couldn't help but admire what she was seeing. It was then she took notice of what she had awakened upon. Soft, squishy, and warm. It was a bed. A king-size bed, to be exact. With shades of green and teal stitching, Jida found herself quickly admiring the patternwork. It was so delicate and created with true passion, she thought. A blanket had also been rested around her lower waist, implying that whoever took her here decided to not lock her up, but rather treat her with some sense of decency. It was then she remembered. "Void! Knock!" Jida gasped before she quickly got off the bed. Everything suddenly flashed back into her mind. The snakes, Void and Knock falling, and then passing out from the stress. Stepping upon smooth and warm wood, Jida looked around her environment in a panic. Were Void and Knock dead? She questioned with a cold chill accompanying the thought. No, they can't be. They're stronger than that, Jida said to herself with a determined flare, before turning to one of the windows and looking out to see where she had been housed. She was on an upper floor. Below stretched down tons of pillars, bricks, and multiple structured formations that made the musician realize that she was inside some kind of castle or large fortress. Flags danced within the storm, while a massive wall surrounded the structure. That sight alone had been the dead giveaway. On closer examination, Jida noticed that surrounding the castle were tons of teal and orange glowing trees that the musician found to be pretty. However, it couldn't shake her mind from the current circumstance. She was still clothed in her now broken flannel and shorts, but she couldn't help but wonder, what was going on? Suddenly from behind, the sound of a door creaking open caught Jida's attention. Whirling around with a hard stance, she went to summon her cosmic fire, but found that whatever spell the snake had put on her was still present. As if to speak of the devil, that same snake slowly entered into the room, the leader of the Constrictor clan, Naja. Entering inside, the massive snake eyed Jida down with a stern stare, leaving the musician to back up and press herself against the window. Sweat quickly poured down her brow as panic began to seep into her soul. Slowly, the large snake began to approach, his eyes locked with hers, and ever so gently poking out his tongue, akin to all snakes. "Good morning, Jida," Naja greeted with his slippery voice. Looking to the side, Jida found there to be a candle stand sitting next to the bed. Quickly reaching out, she took hold of it and held it firmly in front of herself, using it to act as some sort of defense. "Back the hell up, bub," Jida cried with an angered flare in her hair. She couldn't use her cosmic fire, but it was still visible for all to see, and it was furiously burning. Squinting, Naja gawked at Jida for a moment, until raising both his arms up. Looking down, the musician expected the large snake to begin attacking her, reaching for a strangle, to slap or claw. However, that's not what happened, for there was something within the beast's two hands, that being a plate of freshly cooked food. "I'm not here looking for a fight. I'm here to give you breakfast," Naja said as he gestured the plate of food towards Jida. In response, the musician's eyes jumped from the plate and then to the large eyes of Naja, then back at the plate, then back at the eyes. Gripping the candle stand till her knuckles turned white, Jida's face furrowed to that of an almost angrier expression. "Are you serious right now?" she asked, continuing to press herself against the soaking wet window. Sighing with a roll in his reptilian eyes, Naja set the breakfast plate upon the bedside before putting his arms out at his sides, showing that he had no weapons on hand.
Look, it's pretty safe to say we came off upon the wrong foot,
Naja said with an annoyed look in his eye. No shit, Sherlock. Jida snapped whilst inching ever closer to bashing the snake across his nasty curving snout. Lowering his hands, Naja proceeded to slowly lower his body to be eye level with Jida. His large form curled around into a honey bun-like shape that almost took up half the room. All the while, Jida felt as though she were going to explode from anxiety, for she had no real way of defending herself. No kick or punch would match the speed of the massive snake. The thought of getting constricted and or eaten made the musician rather uneasy.
Let's start from the top. My name is Naja. I am the king, the emperor, whatever you want to call me, of the Constrictor clan.
The snake revealed before holding out his left hand, the one that wasn't ghostly. With a face of disbelief and disgust, Jida clenched her teeth and shook her head. She wanted so badly to just smack Naja across the face. But the difference in power was present. It would have been a death sentence. Dude, first off, you already know my freaking name. And second, what the hell are you trying to do? Jida inquired as she eyed the snake with burning fury. You beat the ever-living shit out of my friends, threw them off your stupid flying reptile, and you kidnapped me, and now you're trying to make a good first impression? Jida almost screamed as her hair began to ever so slightly smoke. She couldn't believe Naja's words. He really tried to make an effort. But for Jida, she could see right past the stitched-together attempt.
It was the only way to get you here, dear Jida. I understand this looks terribly in every sense of the word. But you must understand, I am not gonna hurt you.
Naja replied as he lowered his hands yet again. Buddy, you already did. You threw my boys into a freaking jungle. If they're dead, so help me. Jida barked in a spitting sense of words as her face began to furrow with sadness and rage.
Your friends are very much alive. A group of tracker ants reported back to me while you were out cold. They are, in fact, still among the living.
Naja revealed before clasping his hands together with a disgruntled posture. Biting her lower lip, Jida ever so gently lowered the candlestick before retorting in a confused manner of words. Whether you're lying or telling the truth, that's oddly specific, dude. Huffing, Naja slithered a few feet back to give Jida some more room to breathe. His long body made a slick and grotesque sliding sound as he moved. It was all so uncanny, foul. Upon realizing the room that had been made, Jida took a breath and ever so gently stepped forward. However, still extremely cautious to the massive snake. But she had to know. What do you want with me? Jida asked, cutting straight to the point with a hard set of words. Looking up with his teal, glowing eyes, Naja himself took a breath before replying with two words that made Jida both curious and baffled.
Your help.
Lowering the candlestand even further, Jida scrunched her eyes before continuing on with this odd yet unexpected conversation. The words seemed to slowly slip from Naja's lips, making the musician bounce with several itching thoughts. My help. What on God's green earth could you possibly need from some poor burning-haired city girl? Please, elaborate, your highness. Jida finished, dragging on the S to mock the big snake's slippery tone. Grumbling under his breath, Naja turned his body to the side and pat a section of his lower snake's half, gesturing for Jida to take a seat.
Come, sit. I shall show you.
Naja added, leaving Jida to wince with a disgusted face.
I assure you, Jida, you are not a prisoner here. Once I explain, and once you help me, I assure you, I will reunite you with your friends.
Naja stated in that smooth yet prickly tone of voice before pointing back to the plate of food on the bedside.
Your eggs are also getting cold.
Looking from Naja, then to the plate of food, Jida couldn't help but feel her soul crumble to the circumstances. Her mind felt off. She was angry, scared, and confused. However, the snake, Naja as he called himself, was coming off as rather passive. If he wanted to, he could have totally forced her to do what he wanted. Yet he sat there, waiting patiently and talking in a collective tone. Jida wanted nothing more than to leave, but she knew that she couldn't run far. Even if she did escape, where would she go? The only option, the uneasy option, was to go along with Naja. Oh boy. Jida mumbled before taking the food off the bed and approaching the large snake, who nodded in appreciation. Slithering through a massive royal hall, Naja, now with Jida riding on his back half like a horse, gently made his way towards a massive room in the not-so-far-off distance. With a disgruntled face, Jida slowly ate her eggs, which to her surprise, turned out to actually be pretty good. As she chewed, she gazed her view around the massive hall that they were going through, albeit with mixed emotions. The floors had been lined with a brimming red carpet that stretched from one end of the hall to the other, looking to be many feet in length while being almost 10 in width. The walls that surrounded the unlikely duo looked to go as high as your average ballroom, being topped with a green-tinted glass roof that shimmered within the rain. With 5 spaces apart, arose large wooden pillars that held everything up, being both cleaned and glossed with the same kind of redwood material. These pillars held a large and demanding presence, making this hall even more extravagant in its design. To top it off, paintings upon paintings lined the spaces in between the redwood pillars, many of landscapes, snakes, and creatures that inhabited the world, leaving Jida still a tad intrigued to it all.
You appeared to be fascinated with my art.
Naja croaked out as he himself glanced through the paintings on the wall. Switching her gaze towards the snake, Jida took another bite from her eggs before responding with a mouthful. Oh, you painted these? Great, now they're ruined. Squinting with a low growl, Naja focused his attention back forward and slithered into the next room ahead. This new area looked to be a dining hall of sorts. Many of the snake people sat at sets of wooden tables while they too ate away at their own plates of breakfast. Looking up, the snake people nodded towards their larger one, who nodded back in a calm gesture.
Food looks great, fellas. Enjoy your meal.
Naja barked, leaving Jida to just stare awkwardly at everything. Ew. She slightly mumbled under her breath as she and Naja rounded a corner and began descending down a flight of stairs. Rose-tinted windows stretched up and down the walls as the stairwell curved into a downward spiral. More of Naja's paintings lined the walls, many of little forest creatures, and many more of landscapes and the like, while others showed off a new type of serpent-like figure. This figure was that of another snake, one that looked akin to Naja. However, had a white and blue scale pattern as opposed to Naja's dull, darker shades. The snake also held feminine features that was accompanied by a beautiful gown and headdress. The best way Jida could describe it was that if a geisha had become a snake.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, Jida.
Naja asked as they entered into another familiar-shaped hall. Squinting her eyes, the musician took a deep breath before crossing her arms in a displeased type of face. She wasn't having any of it. Listen, whatever you're trying to do, ease me up, comfort, or butter me, I can see right through it. But I'll have you know that I am fluent in 6 other forms of kicking your ass. Jida mentioned, leaving Naja to roll his eyes.
By the gods, are you always this cranky? Listen, I promised you that you were not a prisoner here. I, as well as my clan, will not hurt you. You are a guest, a very special guest.
Naja returned, while his ghostly arm sparked with some kind of energy. No kidding. So, what exactly do you need my help with? Because frankly, I don't want to be a welcome guest anymore. Huffing, Naja turned his massive head around and looked Jida square in her ghostly white eyes. His breath smelled to be that of death and poison gases. It made Jida want to hurl her eggs back upon the plate.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in love?
Naja inquired with his raspy voice, leaving Jida to hold still for a sharp moment. Biting the inside of her cheek, she awkwardly looked to the side with only her eyes, leaving Naja to continue speaking.
It's pretty good, wouldn't you agree?
Jida could hear it in the serpent's tone. He knew she had feelings for someone. The thing that tipped it over the edge was the grimacing smile upon his face. Why do you ask? Jida inquired as her face refocused upon Naja. Turning his head back around, the large snake turned down another flight of stairs, these being a massive straightforward drop that led into a massive shrine room of sorts. Statues of snakes, all carved in marble, lined the walls, being surrounded by murals of torches, flowers, and all sorts of memorabilia. The room felt like a mourning spot more than anything to Jida, until the snake turned and continued talking.
Many, many years ago, I ruled with my dear queen, Betsy.
Naja remarked as he craned his gaze up to a massive mural upon the wall. Following his gaze and sliding off the snake's back, Jida looked upon the mural as well. It had been a large oil painting of the white snake once again. This queen, Betsy, as Naja referred to her as.
She was everything.
Pulling his ghostly arm out by his side, Naja cracked upon its frail fingers and snapped them, in turn causing an eruption of green smoke to engulf the room. Upon seeing this, Jida gasped and stood back in a defensively manner, but the forces of teal green and ominous hues engulfed her like a cloud of smoke. Dropping the plate of food, she went to cover her mouth. However, it didn't stop the sudden gust of energy. The next thing the graduate knew was that her whole world seemed to change, until reawakening into another. Opening her eyes, Jida found that she was no longer in the shrine room. Rather, the orange-haired musician found herself to be standing ankle-deep within some kind of swamp. Murky water danced up and down around her ankles, with leeks and flowers sprouting from its shallow depths. Dense trees and a cold grayish-green fog surrounded her at all angles, as well as insects and chirping noises from the alien life that existed all around. Looking from her left and then to her right, Jida glanced between the thickets of trees and flying pests. Soft rain pelted down. However, she remained dry in all senses of the word. It was as though it were an illusion. What the hell? She asked as a distant boom erupted from somewhere within the fog. Whirling her head to look behind herself, Jida craned her sights to see where the loud sound had erupted from, only to be met with something else entirely. Within the fog, a shadowy shape began to emerge, looking to run forward in an almost soldier-like manner. A rifle looked to be jutting out of their arm as they hobbled within the murky water. Their head appeared to be round as well, along with their body and limbs. It was then Jida noticed the round horns atop their head. "Void?" she cried. Lighting up with excitement, the musician began to approach the moving shadow, thinking that by some scratch or miracle, the spark had found her. However, as the figure crossed the fog barrier, Jida stopped and gasped as the form ran right through her. It looked like Void, but wasn't exactly him. Rather, it was a misty recreation of what Jida could only describe as a spark. "Whoa," she said with a cold sensation rushing through her soul. Turning around, she watched this spark-like illusion run back into the fog, until it was soon followed by another, and then another, and another. Looking to her left and right once more, Jida watched as more of these spark-like phantoms appeared and disappeared into the fog. Like soldiers, they ran with their weapons at the ready, blasters deployed, Nova Blades at the helm. It was crazy, Jida thought. What was this, she pondered.
I take it that your Spark friend has told you about the wars his people fought through.
The voice of Naja came as he slithered himself out from the fog to stand beside Jida. Noticing this, the musician crossed her arms and refused to look at the massive snake, choosing to instead watch the spark apparitions appear and disappear into the mist. Why are you showing me this? Jida bluntly asked as Naja stared forward as well, watching as the orb-headed illusions appeared and disappeared from sight.
To help you better understand.
The large serpent returned as he changed the scene with a flick of his ghostly arm. Emerging from the water, now appeared liquefied versions of both Sparks and Constrictor clan members, as well as strange frog and axolotl-like beings that Jida didn't recognize. The Sparks and water creatures fought side by side, taking on the snakes in an almost primal type of warfare. Technology versus magic was the best way to describe it. Future versus past.
You see, many years ago, I wanted to expand my empire for my clan, my people. I tried to make treaties, but the other folk, the Ripples, wanted to keep their precious lands all to themselves. This, in turn, led to a war between our great tribes.
Naja explained as he pointed to the frogs and axolotls.
During this war effort, I figured I'd try to move some of my people to different worlds, dimensions, realities, to expand our great kingdom. I had figured that maybe other realities would be more appreciative of our goals. But then, they came.
Naja hissed as he glared at the spark illusions. Turning her head, Jida turned to look upon the snake, her eyes furrowed with a slightly confused gaze, before she responded in a tad dry tone. So, you tried to expand an empire, but others didn't want that. I don't blame them after what you've shown me. Jida said, while scowling towards Naja with a side eye.
Those damn Sparks, so enlightened by their abilities, thinking they could police other dimensions, change what they saw as fit. We were winning the war until those pathetic orbs came through. They ruined everything.
Naja hissed as he clenched his fist in a fit of rage. From the sounds of your voice and what you did to my city, I doubt you are the goody two-shoes you're trying to make yourself out to be. If I were to take a guess, I think they had every right to step in. Jida retorted with a firm huff in her chest.
They had no right, no right! This wasn't their fight. And to make matters worse, they took the one thing I cared about the most in this world.
Naja croaked as he flicked his hand again to change the scene. Before them appeared three figures, two large snakes that looked to be replicas of Naja, and one spark that appeared to be female in posture. With a quick form of movement, this spark lunged at the two snakes. In reaction, one of them got in the way, looking to protect the other. However, Jida watched as the spark deployed a Nova Blade and sliced the snake's right arm clean off. This spark then knocked the injured snake aside and plunged her blades deep into the chest of the other serpent. An echoed scream erupted from her throat, while a distant cry of plea came from the one-armed snake, before the illusion crumbled back to the water below.
They took my Betsy from me. They robbed me of the one being in all the worlds that made me feel something. But now there is nothing.
Turning around, Jida gazed upon Naja with a hard set of eyes. She still wasn't catching on. If anything, she was growing rather annoyed at the downright almost pathetic death story. She knew the pain of losing a loved one, but she couldn't necessarily say that she felt anything for the one who hurt her and her boys. In an easier sense, she didn't care. How tragic. It explains the CGI looking arm, I guess. Jida said, eyeing down the magic floating limb at Naja's side. Slowly, the snake rose his hand up and gazed upon its withered form, before sighing under his breath in a very depressed manner.
It's the only piece of her I couldn't let go,
the snake revealed, hinting that the arm was that of his late Betsy.
Ever since that war, after her death, I have longed for her, cried for her. No matter how hard I tried to move on, my body forever yearned for hers. My mind forever cradled with the thoughts of what I could have done differently.
Naja sadly explained, while looking to the rainy sky above.
I figured that I would forever be trapped in a cycle of torment. Until one fateful night in my sleep, she spoke to me.
Snapping his fingers again, the world shifted into that of a black and empty void. Both Naja and Jida were still visible, as though darkness had no effect on them. Glints of stars then slowly began to emerge around in a spherical shape, until igniting into both that of orange and teal shades of light. Although uneasy, Jida found herself to be entranced in these beautiful formations, making her feel almost at home in a sense. It was then Jida bare witness to several of the stars beginning to take the form of two shapes. They turned into one orange dragon-like snake, and the other a teal replica of the other. Whoa. Jida mumbled, watching as the celestial serpents began to swirl around one another, looking to be happy, tender, and in love, as they curved both their bodies into the shape of a heart.
There is a tale about this world, a tale in truth. The two serpents you see now are the ones responsible for this planet's creation, Ophis.
Naja began as the two serpents suddenly began to fight mid-air without warning, leaving Jida the gasp from surprise.
Their names are Warnog and Yaru, the gods of this world.
Naja began, sounding tender in his recollection of thought.
Once upon a time, the two serpents loved each other very much. From this, they birthed the world out of their shared embrace. For many years, they cared for the planet, but soon fell possessive in their own mindsets.
Naja explained to Jida as the fight got into a bloodbath above.
They fought and fought, until one day, before they destroyed our home, they were sealed away by an ill warrior with a spell, before they could kill us all.
Naja explained as the star patterns fused Warnog into the image of a sun and Yaru into that of a moon.
You see, there is a prophecy that if a marriage between their primordial energies, that of Yaru's star-forged power and Warnog's fire, were to mix, the beast would awaken and in turn grant us the prosperity in the end days. It would be a chance to truly reunite with our loved ones in the path of light.
Squinting, Jida looked back to Naja with stern eyes before asking, how? Closing his eyes, Naja took in a deep breath and returned aloud in an eerie tone.
Yaru, my great ancestor. She speaks to me. In my dreams, she promised me I could see my late Betsy again if I were to free her and Warnog. Hence why you are here, dear Jida.
Leaning down, Naja got almost nose to nose with the musician before speaking with words that made her skin crawl.
I'm the one who gave you your flame, Jida.
Raising an eyebrow and taking a cautionary step back, Jida tilted her head before retorting in a baffled sense of words.
Excuse me?
She asked as a conflicting surge of anxiety grew in her stomach.
I created you, dear Jida, for this prophecy.
Suddenly, all the stars in the illusion turned to that of a familiar sight for the musician. Everything glinted orange with many constellations. It was identical to her subspace field. Eyes widening, Jida took another step back, now beginning to breathe sharply and tensely. Her mind began to boom with instant questions that seemed to break her apart from the inside. What the hell are you talking about? Jida inquired as her heart began to beat hard against her chest.
I was guided by Yaru's words. She led me to a waterstead, a patch of river that contained remnants of Warnog's blood.
Nausea began as glints of amber began to slowly rain down upon their heads, almost like an inverted snowfall.
You see, Warnog came from a different universe. Scratch that. He is an embodiment of different universes. For he, at the dawn of creation, was one of the many beings embedded with the power known as cosmic fire, the flame that is needed for the ritual.
Feeling a sickly sensation trickling under her skin, Jida's face furrowed as the large snake continued to explain her importance in this almost ludicrous plan.
Using an old spell, I took blood from the river and cast waves of its fire out into the grand omniverse, and in almost all forms of matter, liquid, air, solids, all in hopes that it would latch itself upon a soul.
Naja exclaimed while throwing his arms into the air.
It took many years, but when we inevitably caught wind of a certain force jumping great lengths between realities, with that fire, Yaru called to me, telling me it had worked.
Naja nearly finished as he extended his arms out towards Jida.
Took a while to track, but here you are now, gifted with the powers of a god. But most importantly, gifted with the key to reunite me with my dear Betsy. You are the vessel to my salvation.
For a long moment, Jida just stared upon Naja. He continued to speak, talking as though what he had just said didn't mean the world to her. However, everything that the snake had just explained made Jida's ears begin to ring like a fire alarm. Her mind wasn't thinking straight. She felt numb. Everything in her soul felt as though it had been put on ice in a sense. As the ringing in her head continued, flashes of the past appeared like clockwork. The falling meteors, the burning city of Aurora, the screaming people, and of course, her late family. Flashes of Jida's mom, dad, and little brother felt as though the crash into her sight. The panic they all shared, their last moments as a family being that of terror, and then what became of her. Jida's mind shifted to that of being in the hospital, her skin feeling as though it were on fire. Her once vibrant reddish-pink skin reduced to a dirt-gray ash. Her glistening white hair burned to the color of flames that flipped her life upside down. Then the rejection, kids not wanting to be around her, the ridicule and loneliness she felt for so long, until it all focused back upon the snake, who had been talking and explaining things that Jida could care so less about.
Now, I'm sure that is a lot to take in, but once this is all over, you and your friends will be reunited after the world burns. We will all get our happy endings.
Nasha finished before opening his eyes and looking upon Jida. The musician's eyes, unlike Naja's, were wide, now streaming with burning hot tears that sizzled upon her cheeks. The scalp section upon her hair was now a dark black, while the rest of the orange shimmered sharply with an almost rageful red haze. The constellations under her skin even began to spark and flake into the surrounding light, leaving the larger snake to tilt his head at this sudden change in attitude.
Are you okay, dear Jida?
He asked, clasping his hands together. You killed them. Jida spoke in a rageful yet shaken whisper. Blinking, Naja tilted his head with a confused gaze before asking,
I apologize. I'm afraid I didn't catch what you just said.
Naja stated before leaning in closer. Jida felt as though she were about to explode. Everything had begun to spin. Life seemed almost fake as reality crashed and burned. It was almost cartoonish. For the last 11 years, she had pondered what had caused a downpour of fire into her city. And yet, here and now, she was faced with the supposed being that sent her down the path of where she was today. The vessel, she recalled Naja calling her. This was all a ruse. He didn't care about her. This was a swoon to get what he wanted. To be with someone he had lost. To kill. It was then Jida's mind snapped with a set of thoughts that almost broke her mentally. If I can't have my family back, why should he have a chance with his wife? It was the straw that broke the camel's back. You killed my family. Within a flash, Jida reared her arm down and summoned a massive surge of burning hot energy to her hand. For only a moment, her power levels exceeded past the point of normalcy, just barely tapping the potential she had when Salvaheim practically came alive. Within this short burst, Jida was able to bypass Naja's hold and deliver an almost jaw-shattering right hook upon his lower chin. The impact came as hard as the speed of a flashing bullet. The illusion around suddenly disappeared upon impact, returning the two of them back into the shrine room. Launching backwards with saliva and venom-esque blood spilling from his mouth, Naja crashed hard into the painting of Betsy upon the wall, before falling hard to the ground. Shrine statues fell over and even broke as Naja slowly groaned and collected himself. Jida, however, was quickly reconcealed by the snake's binding spell, but that didn't stop her. Picking up the plate she had dropped, Jida whirled her arm back and threw it at the serpent's face. A glass-shattering crack erupted upon Naja, lodging small glass shards into his muzzle. Opening his eyes, Naja glared upon Jida, who was both screaming and rapidly approaching with the intent to kill. Shaking the rattle in his tail, the leader of the Constrictor clan quickly rose his body up and held his arms out by his sides, proceeding to make himself look bigger as an intimidation display. Jida, however, was looking for a fight, a bloody one at that.
You bastard!
Naja barked, before quickly whirling his tail around and snatching Jida around her neck. Gasping, the musician was quickly lifted off the ground with a sharp yank. Naja's tail was strong and tight, feeling almost akin to burning rubber that had been doused in oil. As his tail slowly craned itself around, Jida watched in shock as a sharp stinger shot out from the back end of the rattle. Teal venom oozed from its tip, while the stinger itself looked to almost glimmer in the dim memorabilia light. Slowly moving it forward, Naja gently pressed its sharp end underneath Jida's chin, in turn making her realize once more just how out of match she was.
You petty little vessel. I give you power, and this is how you thank me?
Naja hissed as he began to gently drag his stinger across Jida's cheek, and then wipe away a tear with it.
Do not hold me responsible for what has been lost. It's a part of life after all.
The snake hissed, growing even closer.
Tonight, when the ritual ends, we will all be reunited with the fallen, as the gods torch this wretched planet to the ground.
Struggling while kicking her legs, Jida was able to mutter out a crunched, "You're crazy," to the hypocrisy in the snake's words.
Love has been told to make one so.
Naja retorted before dropping Jida to the ground. Landing on her hands and knees, she began to cough and wheeze, now finding her breath.
Tonight, on the 12th hour, we will have a wedding, my dear Jida. Not out of love for each other, but for the love we share for our real soulmates.
Wincing with a disgusted gaze, Jida shook her head before slowly standing to her feet, knees buckling and nerves shot.
That look in your eyes, the spark, the way you reached for him, the manner in which you cried for him. You two will be reunited as All of us will. In the god's kiss of death.
Naja continued before reaching out a hand and grabbing Jida by her head.
I'm not a monster, Jida. All I want is to give me and my people meaning again, even if that involves the world's destruction.
Naja hissed while gripping her skull.
That is Yaru's promise. Once their fight is done, we will all have our happy endings.
With pain tears streaming down her face, Jida looked away from Naja with her eyes, and then towards a dim window that had been shining through. Casting down upon her was a gentle light that peeked from in between the storming clouds. The rivers of tears streaming down her face seemed to glisten back upon the floor in its reflection, making things feel all the more tragic in a sense. Collecting herself within Naja's grasp, Jida stared into the light, almost feeling a certain yet strange sense out there, a familiar one that her energy yearned for, and in a sense, she knew the other to be calling back. It was small, but Jida recognized the feeling. It was as though, miles apart, both her and Void called to one another. The one I love is on his way, Your Highness. And when he gets here, you better be ready. Jida taunted before closing her eyes hard. 'Cause you've got a big storm coming your way. Grimacing, Naja turned and put Jida back atop his slithery form, before beginning to crawl his way back towards the room she had been housed in.
I've faced many sparks. What will be so different about this one in particular? I've bested him already, may I remind you?
Naja asked as they began to ascend the stairs. Because you hurt the only family he has left. And trust me, I've seen what he can do when I especially get hurt, Jida stated with an angered glare through her tears. Before long, Jida was back inside her room. However, the door had now been locked, leaving her alone once more. For a long while, Jida paced back and forth, rubbing her arms, shaking from the cold. Yet worst of all, was the constant crying she couldn't stop. Never had she cried so much, not since the night of 1,000 flames. Memories of her family flashed like fireworks in her field of view. It had already hurt enough as a freak accident, but now knowing that had been brought upon by Naja himself, just added a layer of pain to the already burdened memory. Her family's killer was now holding her hostage. She didn't care what Naja called it, how much he cared for her, fed her, and the like. She was imprisoned to perform a ritual that she could easily piece together now would bring devastation to a lot of people. Legs crumbling and head hurting, Jida sat upon the bedside and shoved her hands deep into her face, proceeding to silently weep, alone. All she wanted was to go home, to hear Nox's ramblings, to create music, and to just be with Void. She missed him, was worried sick for him. She couldn't explain it, but somehow she knew that he was on his way. It was like your cosmic fire yearned for him, drawing to him. It was an odd feeling, but one that just made the pain even worse. As she wept, Jida could only hope to tell him just how she felt, when, or even if, this was all over. Void, please, hurry. Jida whimpered into the vastness of sorrow. However, many miles away from Naja's fortress, within the pouring rain and fading clouds, walked Void, Nox, and Coco, who had just passed a sign indicating that a train stop was near. However, Void halted mid-stride as a faint whisper called from within his mind. The same set of words that had just been called from afar. Void, please, hurry. Gasping aloud, Void stumbled, leading to both Nox and Coco turning at the spark with confused eyes. Whoa, hey, what is it? Nox asked with a raised eyebrow. For a long moment, Void stared blankly ahead, shocked as to what he had just heard. He wasn't sure if he was going insane, or if it had just been his imagination. All he could say was the only thing on his mind.
Chida,